We've all heard about climate change, rising temperatures, global targets, and melting ice caps. But here in Ghana, it feels closer than that. Hotter days in Accra. I'm sure you've heard Accra is hot, but maybe with a different context. Floods that keep returning. Farmers unsure when the rains will come. Climate change is not far away. It's happening right here. Okay, so today we have Professor Agyeman Boafo. He is an associate professor at the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies, C3SS, at the University of Ghana. His work focuses on climate change adaptation, sustainability science, and ecosystem services, with particular interest in how urban and rural communities are responding to climate impacts using science and traditional knowledge. He holds a PhD in sustainability science from the United Nations University in Tokyo and degrees in environmental science and geography from the University of Ghana. In this conversation, he brings strong research and policy experience on climate resilience, nature-based solutions, and how local realities can inform effective climate action. Thank you so much for doing this today, Prof. Boafo, it's nice to have you here.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to share some of my perspectives and my experience on this very topical issue.
Yes, wonderful. I think my first question would be a very easy one. It would be like killing a mosquito with an elephant's gun. But Prof, what is climate change? Just general.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. I think you started by giving us or giving the audience a sense of why this conversation is important and what you think people are experiencing lately, at least based on what you hear on radio, on TV, in your neighborhoods, in the church, in your own homes. There's a clear sense or agreement that our weather is changing. And that feeling is not just in your heads or in our heads. That's climate change. And that's something that, we are experiencing right here in Ghana, as well as in many other parts of the world. So that has to be established. But now let's break it down further to what exactly this change means, and then try and make sense out of it for everybody to understand. Because it's not just science, it's actually real life. And for me, as a researcher, a scientist, I like to start with what is changing. And I'll break it down this way. Let's first look at heat. Heat, something that we connect also to temperature. But the evidence that we have over the last, let's say, in Ghana, for instance, over the last 50 years or maybe 30 years, it shows that it's getting hotter. It's getting hotter. And more importantly, it's not just getting hotter, it's staying hot. What it means is that the nights are becoming warmer. And what that means also is that your body doesn't really get to recover on time. And if you want to look at where the data comes from, the Ghana Meteorological Agency records data on daily basis on how much heat or how the temperature is changing. And so the temperature could be either getting colder or warmer. But the evidence that we are getting shows that the average temperature that we are experiencing has gone up. So let's just say in a very typical warm season, dry season within the country, for instance, we know that in Ghana, around the month of March, April, even depending on where you live, from November, December, those are the hottest months of the year. And temperatures, typically could be ranging from, normal temperature could be ranging from, let's say, 32 degrees, 34 degrees Celsius, on daily at extreme times. Mm-hmm. But now the information that we have shows that these are sometimes staying at 34 degrees, 36 degrees, which is an evidence that it's getting warmer and warmer. So that's something that I think we should understand. And if it's getting hotter and hotter, what does that mean? It affects your sleep, it affects your energy, and even your mood. That is just one component. So let's just try and look at this. This is on the heat part. Imagine a street vendor or a driver or a construction worker, who is always working on the open spaces. That heat, in my opinion, is not just uncomfortable. It directly affects how much they can also earn in a day. So that's the one on heat. as an evidence of the change in climate. We can then also look at the rainfall, okay? Rainfall, as we know, in a country like Ghana where people rely on rainfall for different purposes, especially people in rural areas where it is important. In the past, the farmers could predict which month or which time of the week it will actually rain. It was a normal thing for most farmers in our country. But now it's not possible. I don't know if Andy, you've been involved in farming before. If there's any relative that you think has been involved in farming and they can deal with some of those stories. So what is happening is that all over the country, people who rely on the rainfall for farming realize that the rains are coming late, and then it also stops early. And in my work across the country, in northern Ghana especially, these are the stories that I hear every time I go to the north. Because when that happens, what it means is that either the crops that they planted in anticipation of the rainfall or the seedlings will not grow. It gets to a point where they need water to basically flower and then also start generating. Then it also becomes limited. Then all of a sudden also there'll be one flash rain and then it will also destroy all the flowers that they had.
Extreme.
These are, evidence that we've gathered from all over the country. So instead of rain being good, it's now rain and it's all more or less uncertainty for people. We can also then connect this rain to a very important factor, which is also linked to the changing climate or changing weather. And that is what we call the flooding, extreme flooding. Because I mentioned that, for instance, those of you who live in Accra, we know that anytime it rains heavily, Accra is likely to flood. It's not just because of climate change that is causing the flooding. Let me establish that first. It's very important.
Yeah.
But what is happening is that sometimes it rains for just a very short period of time, but the volume of rain that we get is actually more than, let's say, a month's amount of rain. So it means that short rainfall, but high volumes of rain, which is more intense. So we call that extreme, cases of rainfall. And because our cities are also not properly planned with the drainage systems and gutters, we usually are not ready to, basically, deal with the volumes that we get within just a short time. And so flooding occurs when rain, for instance, meets the blood drainage systems or plastic waste that we see all around us, which is something that we are seeing, or building in waterways that I think we are. But another important fact, some of you may have also heard about wetlands. Wetlands, by design, that is nature's own way of moderating the amount of rainfall that hits the ground and helps to, use it well. But Andy, I'm sure you know about wetlands and then the
nature's sponge.
Exactly.
Some scientists say. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's something that comes up. So the question becomes: is it climate change that we are seeing, or is how we are designing our cities that is leading to all this impact of the climate change? So climate change, just to rehash, is happening. It's happening because over time, humans have basically changed the nature of what I call the system that brings the weather that we experience every day. So another dimension to this is the fact that before we get even rainfall or before we get a certain amount of sunshine or temperature or humidity, it is because of the working of different systems. The ocean, the forest, the areas in the world where there's ice, the ice sheet. Then we have what we call the underground, the earth, the rocks. The rocks that we call it lithosphere, they call it the lithosphere. And then comes the final one, the atmosphere, or what is in space. So these 5 different components, they work together to give us the weather that we receive. But because over the years, humans have altered all these different components in different ways, the ability of these things to perform optimally has changed. And that is why we are experiencing different climatic, regimes nowadays. The part that we usually talk about is the atmosphere, which is what people think that's, but no.
Greenhouse gases.
It is not just that. All the things that I talked about, we've changed the ice sheet, we've changed the forests for different purposes. So these 5 are working together. They are not independent. if you are mining, for instance, within the ground, the lithosphere, it also affects the ability of all this to work together, the ocean. So that is why we are experiencing it. And then all over the world, the evidence of the change is there. So what I'm trying to talk about in this last point, Andrew, is that I'm trying to talk about what is driving all this change. And that's where we know about the greenhouse gases, right?
Yeah, greenhouse gases.
Greenhouse gases are what? These are gases that naturally exist within the atmosphere. But because human beings have been burning fuel, your car, once you got here today, did you come here with a car today?
Yes, that's how we move in Accra.
Exactly. So we realize that we can't help but move with cars. We can't move with planes, depending on where you are. Right. We also likely, did something else in our homes when we woke up. These are all contributing to different kinds of emissions or gases, which are also affecting the climate. Okay?
Yeah.
And so it's important to talk about that. So in Ghana, yes, we are also contributing to this through our movement, the cutting down of trees in the forest, because I mentioned earlier that the forest is also a part of the system, the climate system. We call it the climate system. And so that is part of it. When you are building your house, you're also contributing to the change in the climate system. And in the same way, we are affecting. So climate change is not just happening to us. It is something we are shaping. Okay? Yeah. It's not some abstract thing. And I think your audience should also understand that when we say climate change, it's a natural phenomenon. But the change that we are currently experiencing is being driven by human beings and our activities. One last point to let you know, it's being driven by human beings because in the last 30 years of human existence, we have added more than 3 billion people to the population. At least since we started recording, just 30 years alone, we have added about 3 billion people to our population. And that is more of impact that we are having on the planet Earth, and we are changing all the system. Not like many, many years ago where we had, let's say, a certain 1 million. Within the 30 years, we've added 3 billion. That's a lot. That is changing also the climate. So it's something that we need to appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, the carbon footprint alone of the number of people that have been born or lived within these last few years is more than a big chunk of human history. So certainly something must change. It's like you're having a pond and you have so many fish, and the chemistry of whatever water you have in there would certainly change drastically. So I get that. So over the last few minutes, we've spoken about what climate change is. A big point to the increase in temperature, and then a big point to the reduction and unpredictability of rainfall as well. And in either cases, there are always extreme weather events happening in there, like flash flooding and stuff like that. Certainly, these things are also affected by many different factors. So, for instance, anytime you talk about how climate change is increasing average rainfall, but at the same time it's reducing rainfall, and then some people will be like, oh, why are we having droughts? Why are we, having some of these issues? Yes, rainfall would increase drastically, but in the extreme ways, causing flooding.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it would reduce significantly. So people can't even predict when it should be falling. And then, in a country where we have rain-fed agriculture being a big part of people's livelihoods, would feel it. I used to play a game with a friend where I'd say they should mention something and I'll connect climate change to that particular thing. Like everything that's happening now, let's blame it on climate change. And I mean, there's a strong link.
There is.
Anyhow. I mean, the example we were talking about, extreme heat affecting people's emotions. I mean, just think about a water seller. If it's very hot and they're in traffic, you'd be buying more water. They would be happier. Emotion directly. At the same time, too, if you meet a construction worker and they've been working at the site in this heat, and then they finish work for the day and you don't give them their money, what would happen when they get home? All kids go to your room. So these are some of the things. There are connections everywhere. Let's jump to another question. I think this one would be more of a story side thing.
Yeah.
Prof, you've been doing this climate work for a while. Can you share some one or two local stories that show how climate impacts ecosystems, well-being, livelihoods? I mean, you've shared a few already, but I mean, let's do two more stories, interesting ones.
Okay. I like the way you put interesting ones. Every story is interesting.
Yeah,
Every story is interesting, depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But yes, I think I'll say that one thing I've observed, both from my research and from being in communities, is that climate change is not changing. It's not just more or less changing the environment. It is changing how people experience their environment, and I think that's something that I would love to talk about. And in fact, my recent work in fact, I've been doing this work for a while, but recently I published an article along the Volta coastline. And in that particular work, we found out that what's happening that is connecting to climate change is not just a physical change, but I also describe it as a kind of what I called a socio-spatial unmaking. Okay? And I'll explain that because we're looking at land, people's land. People who live in the coast, their land is basically the coastline and right around it. It's also an area of memory. That's where they've lived their whole life. So the sea is like something that they have a lot of memory with. And also it's an issue of identity. So the land, the memory and identity are all being disrupted at the same time, okay? So let me speak to this from this angle. The community that I'm talking about is called Ofosuhemaa and Atiteti. Ofosuhemaa and Atiteti are directly in the Volta region. Just depending on where you're going, when you get to Saviotula, you go right, you go to Jita, then you move further, then you basically are in that community. In those communities, people are basically watching what I'll call the sea take over their land. Not gradually, but visibly year by year. And one of the most powerful things the residents said in my field work was that they said that we live on borrowed land. I mean, to me, this statement reflects what really, in a true sense of sustainability, what it's all about. Because humans, we live on borrowed land. We come and grow, But there's also that manifestation from that word that people feel like at this point, this is clearly a borrowed land because of the rapid impact of sea level rise or erosion on their land, that they have to be moving almost every year away from what they are doing. So let me try and maybe also make it more visual. Imagine waking up every day knowing that where you live might not be there in just the next 5 years.
You go to work, come back, your house is gone.
Exactly. That changes how you build, okay? It changes how you also plan your future. And, from what I've seen in Ofosuhemaa and Atiteti and those places, people don't build permanent structures anymore. People build with straw, with raffia, that's what they do because they know that they can't afford to go and invest a lot of money in building that foundation. So if you go there right now, there's a lot of pictures that I actually shared in that. They are doing so because they are constantly ready to move. And that's something that they've lost their cemeteries. Whoa. They've lost their shrines. Even their schools. So I think it's something that it's a clear manifestation of what is happening. And so when we talk about climate change, we're not just talking about flooding or erosion. We're also talking about grief. We need to look at those. I call them invisible, manifestations of climate change that we don't see on a daily basis. So we're talking about grief, and we're talking about identity, we're talking about memory, things that you, in your hometown, if you live somewhere that you can go there every year for the next 50 years and you still be able to see certain things, they don't see that. And so I'll refer the audience to look for this article that I wrote, Believe on Borrowed Lands, and see, there are some good images as well, and see what we call them place-based loss. Place-based loss is where like environmental change, it's not even just climate change, environmental changes are so much that people don't recognize, where they used to live or where they are anymore. So this is one example of this from my work in the coastal part of Ghana.
I think, just to chip in, I believe there was a tidal situation there recently, and the president visited the communities and, engaged with them, spoke to them about their loss and all of that. And so this is very real, so sad. I think it's such a big coincidence that the paper came out slightly earlier in the year before this happened. But that's how science is. Sometimes it's so predictive because the issues are happening actively. Prof, you were about to share another thing. So.
Yes, you're right. And it has become an annual event in terms of the erosion, the flooding levels in the coastline. It's not even just in that community, but if you go further to Blekusu, all the areas, and there are also many of such communities along the coastline of Ghana whose stories are not heard because they are either not big enough or they just don't have the influence. So there are many people facing that situation.
540 kilometers coastline, and I saw a study where certain indicators were rated, and it seems that 50% of the coastline, people are open to climate vulnerability. The risk level is so high, so all these communities, all these different people would be at risk when climate hits, and are at risk because these sea level rise, these diseases that are urged on by climate changes and transitional issues, people migrating out and all of that. I mean, the loss. I mean, when you were talking earlier, I was just thinking about it. Just imagine you have a relative, a grandfather, an auntie you love, and where they were buried is no longer there. Like, it's gone because the waters have just destroyed everything. And that's quite sad.
You're right, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And let me give another example that, this is also reflects a lot of my work in northern Ghana, okay? Now, for you, some of you who live in the city, your whole life, maybe by work you've taken yourself to other parts of the country.
City boys.
City boys, yeah. So try and now picture a farmer. Picture a farmer, a typical farmer. And the reason why you get your yam every day on your plate is because some farmer somewhere, they plant, those crops. And they're usually expecting the rain, okay? The rain delays. So then they wait, then it comes. But when it comes, what happens? It washes away everything that they planted because of the extreme nature of that farming. So again, this is not just a bad season, okay? It's what? It's an income loss. You lost your income. Your food is gone. And then there's also what we call security. Your security is also gone because you invest all your money, you buy the seeds, you put that, and that's what. And here's something that often is ignored. The women are usually the hardest hit in these scenarios. The picture I just painted is simply what is happening to many, many farmers in the country, not just in northern Ghana, but specifically in northern Ghana where I have experience. This is something that is happening a lot to people. They plant, and if it doesn't rain, if it rains, it just destroys everything, back to zero. And then the same northern Ghana, even when they have some amount of rain and then the crops are growing, at a point in time when the flowers and it's ready to yield, then comes pests and diseases. Because know that the amount of humidity in the air or the amount of sunshine or other variables influences certain kinds of pests when it comes to their movement, migration. So there's something called fall armyworm. Fall armyworm destroys several hectares of maize or corn every year. And what if I told you that fall armyworm, they migrated from another part of the world? Let's just say they came from Brazil. Will you be surprised that an armyworm or something came from Brazil? How did they even get here anyway? Can they travel? Can they do that? But it's possible. They do. migration trends of certain kinds of pets and diseases, birds and other things like that. They do. And that's something that I think is a real thing. The reason why I brought the women component is the fact that, in many communities, women are responsible for feeding the families, for fetching water, or for managing household issues. So when climate stress comes in, it stresses them further. And that's a point that we need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, the Ghana Wildlife Society has a couple of projects within the northern landscape, especially within the Mole area. And certainly we understand the vulnerability that women as a special demographic face. So there's this project called Africa where we are engaging women and, within that landscape, they do a lot of trainings for them. But I just want to also bring this climate issue to the issue of illegal mining and galamsey. There are many things that cause people to join in galamsey. It's multifactorial, but just picture a farmer putting in all their hard work, investments, loans, and all of those things. They are farming rain-fed agriculture, and they can't predict when it's going to rain. It rains, and then it's extreme rain, so it floods their farm, destroys everything. Those individuals have so much gone, or they've lost so much that they become easier to convince to join in some of these things. And some of these galamseyers, if I should put it that way, or kingpins, or people investing in illegal mining, are paying so much per day. There are individuals showing up on certain sites are being paid like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 a day, and stuff like that. And people are being pushed to some of these things because of climate change as well. I mean, there's obviously other things happening in the greed and security issues and all of them.
Yeah.
Climate change is happening to these people as well, because if you do your cocoa, you have your cocoa farm and it's not raining properly, and pests are also coming up with a new vigor because of the climate and all of those things. The person would say it's better I give this farm out to someone to do illegal mining and then recoup something, So
I like the way you actually
really something
analyzed it and put it into practical reality. Because the whole idea of something like illegal mining or galamsey, which is becoming more and more popular in our rural areas, you're actually connecting the climate change dimension to it.
Livelihood.
Cocoa farmers are telling us that their cocoa is not yielding much now. So why should they keep investing in it when they can make hundreds of thousands of Ghana cedis from selling it to the miners? So I think that's also another dimension that needs to be looked at.
Okay, Prof, let's go into another side. What solutions are proven effective in Ghana now, especially nature-based solutions, and what's making them succeed or fail? Let's hear some good stories now. What is working, honestly, when it comes to climate change, adaptation, mitigation? What solutions are working, especially nature-based solutions? Yeah.
Right. I think, okay, let's be honest about them, okay? I think one big idea you hear nowadays, as you also just mentioned, is what we call nature-based solutions. And nature-based solutions, what it simply means, using nature to solve problems. That is what it means. For example, the idea is that, okay, trees can help cool our cities. This is no magic, right? Everybody here or everybody listening was like, anytime you're feeling like you go under a tree, you're likely to feel cool. Or trees, that's just one part. So again, if the city is becoming hotter and hotter and trees can't do that, what does it mean? It means that you get more trees.
Yeah.
But also you need to look at the appropriate type of trees. Otherwise, if you don't get the appropriate type of trees, the trees will become a problem to you in the long run. So it's not just trees. Knowing the appropriate type of trees for the appropriate place is important. So that's something that works. So if you're thinking about nature-based solutions, you're using nature, then trees are important. I'll touch more on that. But there's what we call mangroves as well, okay? In coastal areas, and I think when the the designers of the earth, or where we live as human beings, the people who designed it, whether you say God designed it or it's designed intelligently by somebody or natural design,
evolution.
Exactly. they did it with a lot of intelligence. They knew that if they're going to give us a huge area of water, ocean, they need to find a way to also make sure that the ocean or the water doesn't always come to take or consume the land. So one of the things that I think they did was that they created mangroves. Mangroves are usually the vegetation that you find along coastal areas. In fact, most coastal areas will likely have mangrove, depending on how much you've been tempered. And those are distinctly designed or beautifully natured in such a way that they find a way to prevent all the volumes of water that will come typically into the land. The trees that are found there, the herbs, all those things, they are designed to store water and also take it and even purify it. So mangroves are important for checking issues of erosion, sea level rise, and they are known to be very effective because, in fact, in 2004, I think 2006, in Indonesia, there's a place called Banda Aceh, where, in fact, that was the first time I personally remember read about tsunamis and how it impacts people, because it was live on CNN. At least I saw some videos whereby they even recorded it. And a tsunami, which is basically an earthquake in the sea, had come to destroy a whole town. It just swept, whole town, people, resort. But after the tsunami, they realized that the areas within the coastal town that had very rich mangrove vegetation, they had limited impact. But the areas that had almost nothing was totally, destroyed, 100%, nothing there. So mangroves are known to protect coastlines.
Yeah, nature's fence, natural.
Exactly, rightly put. And so there's that sense that if you have areas, if you live in a coastal area in mangroves, and just what I know, mangroves only grow in coastal areas. They are effective. They don't grow just anywhere in coastal areas. Then the idea of wetlands, the Sakuma wetland, the Kole, all the wetlands that are also an areas that are designed to, they also are very important because they absorb floods. Too much water, like I said, they can absorb huge volumes of flood. No, you can construct a tantra or maybe a big gutter, but it can't take the floods as the wetlands can take. So that's very important. Then also, trees on farms. When you cultivate your farm and you put trees on them specifically in certain areas, they also help to what they call improve the soil, because trees have a way of also working the soil and even reducing the heat. And I'm sure this one, the farmers will tell us that, Charlie, when I go to the farm and I feel I'd rather sit under a tree and relax. The farmers, they cook their food on the farms and the stuff like that. And that's what we call the agroforestry. Then you allow certain trees to be on the farms so that they can protect you at the same time, improve the soil, even reduce the wind. Typically, if your farm has no wind and has no trees, and then the wind is very strong, what happens? They can sometimes sweep away a lot of your crops. So that's something very important. But here's what I want to challenge on the narrative when it comes to the nature-based solutions, because not all of these that I said work just because they sound good, okay? I mean, I was mentioning earlier about planting the right type of trees. If you plant a tree and you don't water it, what happens? It dies. So it's not like you just go and put the tree there and think, nature-based solution. Exactly. Exactly. And at the same time, linked to the tree planting exercise, if the community doesn't value or see value in the tree, what happens? They will cut it down.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. So, and then there's also another dimension to that. If the land ownership is not clear also about this, nobody will take responsibility for the trees. So the real issue is not just planting trees, it is what? Sustaining them. That's when you enjoy the real benefit of that nature-based solution.
Yeah.
And the same applies to all the wetlands. Otherwise, why do we have the wetlands being destroyed in our city of Accra. Why would somebody go and buy or spend a lot of money to buy land in an area that we know is not meant to be built in, that we know, or that people don't know, but at least the law enforcement should know. But yes, we allow people to do that. So what makes these solutions successful is that people must benefit. I think that's very important. People must be involved. And there must also be the long-term commitment. As for the policies, we have them in Ghana. We have the policies, but I think they are failing because of lack of people understanding the benefit of being involved, and also long-term commitment, which I think it's important. But again, let me highlight that it's not just the future is not just about solutions. It's about how we increasingly implement them, and also it's not just about nature-based solutions. It's how we integrate human effort with nature. If you build a house, people say, okay, why do you tile the whole floor of your outside of your house when exactly you think that you're making it beautiful, but you're forgetting that you're just creating a recipe for flooding in other places. And there's also going to be more heat in your home if you just tile all your floor because you think it looks beautiful. And more heat will also means that you're going to have your health is going to be exposed, because extreme heat can cause several kind of health issues. Dizziness is just one of them, dehydration, and even if you have underlying issues of asthma, you're likely to be exposed because of the kind of heat that comes up. So these are some of the solutions when it comes to nature-based solutions that I think we can point out.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. I mean, mangroves, these are crucial. Communities on the coastline are always or sometimes being supported to grow more mangroves. These special trees trap even certain fish and certain shrimps, crabs grow within the area. So there's always something additional. And then trees growing on farms. So that is old and farmers have been doing it for a while. It's something that would also help. I also want to mention briefly something interesting I found during this this week.
Okay.
So, was it? No, I think a few weeks ago. So, there's a center at GAEC. GAEC is Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. So the center is called the Biotechnology and Nuclear Agriculture Research Institute, BINARI. So, when they did some training on a special bug called the black soldier fly. So people are using this fly to break down organic waste. And so there's something that we can use the fly's life cycle, grow it, have it break down the organic waste, get some help with the compost and stuff like that. And I mean, it opened me to so much, because it seems that people would have the larvae, feed it to their animals, and so you wouldn't need to be farming huge tracts of land. We've spoken about how land use is also a big contributor to the climate change situation we have, and I just wanted to
mention that's actually that approach is also even a form of nature-based solution, as you talked about. We use nature to address certain kind of problems that we face. So that's also another good example that needs to be looked at.
Okay, I think the final thing I would want us to dwell on for a bit now: how can traditional ecological knowledge and just innovation strengthen climate action, and what can the average Ghanaian do? After listening to this podcast, sometimes you hear all kinds of things. I heard a joke about how people in a certain year were asked to stop drinking with plastic straws, and then big men would start flying around with their planes, and one flight will cancel like 1 billion plastic straws and stuff like that, So traditional ecological knowledge, how would that help with climate action? And then what can other people do, like the regular Joes? What can we do? So,
I actually like that analogy of, one flight by, let's say, a private jet, basically nullifies 1 million Ghanaians' effort not to pollute the environment with straws. It's a very interesting one. But it also gives us a deeper knowledge into how issues of justice is when it comes to climate change and finding the solutions or mitigating or adapting. Traditional knowledge, as you're saying it, sometimes I've done some research. I've done a lot of research on traditional ecological knowledge. But later on, I realized that if I had a way, I will not use the word traditional anymore, because I think, especially in our context means that Ghanaian context, traditional sometimes is used to denote a cake, yeah, and something that I don't think is the reality though. But so traditional doesn't mean a cake. Because when you say traditional, you're doing old school or something. It's not entirely wrong, but it's a very powerful approach. When you say traditional knowledge, it's also an innovation of a sort. That's what I think we should, because it refers to what communities already know. Okay, that's what traditional. And sometimes people also use indigenous or local knowledge. So before we even had what we call climate models, where as scientists, we talk about climate models, high computing systems that we use. People use nature to predict the weather. They've been using it, and they still use it in some cases. So they can tell you the weather patterns or the wind patterns, and they can explain that the wind is coming. This is going to be the severity of it. They can tell you that, the animal is behaving this way, so there's going to be rainfall. Some birds are, chipping, or some millipedes are moving. So many things. Snails are coming over, so they're going to tell you that it's going to rain. So that helps them to what? Let's say, okay, let's prepare to plant. They've been doing that for a while now. So, like I said, this knowledge still exists. But here's the harsh reality now with this knowledge system, okay? Because climate change is moving faster and faster, the irregularities is also so fast. The ability of our traditional systems to also be useful is getting reduced. That's very important, because unlike the past when people could look at it, okay, the rain is coming, but now the intensity of the rain, like I said, the amount of rainfall is not what they were used to. And that's because we can go back to then understand the fact that the change that we experience is not a natural change. It is a human-induced change. And that problem is something that we need to be paying attention to, because if you want to pay attention to traditional knowledge, if you go to northern Ghana, they will tell you that, okay, one traditional knowledge that we use to protect our environment or our land is that on certain days we don't go to the farm. People may think of it, why don't you go to the farm? Or even in the coastal area, they'll tell you that, we don't go to the sea on Tuesdays. And you may think, that's when the gods come to rest. In a true sense of it, they're just telling you that don't let us abuse the resource. Let's allow it to rest. So the goals that we're talking about here is not necessarily goals that we negatively look at, but just the resource also needing time to rest. So it's the resources that we are talking about as allowing them to rest. And these systems have been used by our forefathers for ages to preserve the land so that we don't abuse it, so that we don't, end up causing too much damage to it in a way that does not allow them to restore themselves. So these are all restorative approaches that are used. The idea of not killing or not even destroying the share tree, for instance, because the share tree is arguably the most valuable, tree in the savanna or in the semi-arid regions, because of its value to them. It gives them, food, income, herbs for medicine and health issues. So people in many communities in the northern Ghana, the share tree can never be cut for firewood. That's been the tradition for a long time. When you're farming and there's a share around it, and even if there's somewhere, you have to find a way to just leave it as it is and make sure that you don't cut it. You don't also use any part of this for firewood, like I said. But now these things are changing because people are now stretched. People's systems are stretched. So sometimes they cut the share. They use it for purposes. Some water bodies, they don't allow people to farm around water bodies. In fact, for a long time, not just in the north, but also even in the south, in the Somenya, in the Krobo land, for instance, they had a system called the Dawa Odrome system, where people farm their lands, but within a certain distance from the rivers, water bodies, they don't go there because it serves as what we call a riparian buffer, a buffer. Because they know that if once you clear, vegetation along the river body, you're likely to also pollute it. So there's a buffer that allows people to ensure that they don't go further there. That's also a form of traditional knowledge that is being used for dealing with the potential impact that it will have on nature. When I say nature, water bodies, the river, the land, they're all part of nature that we're looking at. So that knowledge system still exists, okay? So for me, the real opportunity in using this knowledge system is to now look at which of them is still important or relevant.
Yeah.
And then combine it with scientific knowledge, document them. We need to document those knowledge systems and then be able to see how they can work hand in hand with modern knowledge. Because not all of them is bad. Most of them are based on evidence taken. They may not have been done in the lab, but they've been done in practice in the communities. Because at the end of the day, if we think of it as things that, it's local, so it's not good, I think it doesn't really help us. So I just want to say that on this particular one, by combining the traditional knowledge with modern knowledge and even technology, including documentation, we are able to look at it as something that can be beneficial and can be resilient, and then we can be able to, use it effectively. Because I think that sometimes even the whole idea of traditional knowledge, if you want to think about it this way, as we sit here even in Accra, we can use knowledge system to say that, okay, don't throw waste into the drains. That's a local system. We know that if you throw into the waste, it has a problem. Or let's say, small scale farming, gardening in our homes. That is also even a form of traditional, because from my research, our forefathers, they've always had small gardens within their compounds when they were growing up. Exactly. And that's something that helps them with basic food needs or food security issues when they're in need of it. So I think it's important that we look at it beyond just as knowledge systems that are outdated and that are not useful for us. And I think I will say something that may be also useful for students and young professionals. And it's something related to what you also said earlier. They shouldn't think of climate change as a separate field, okay? Because it affects everything. I mean, whether you study business or engineering or even social science, I think you have to understand that climate change affects all these components. Your businesses will be impacted by climate change. That's something that I think is very important. Because it's not even an issue, okay, the environment is not my issue. It's not the case. So I think we should look at it more broadly along these lines.
Climate change affects us all.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting stuff. Prof, thank you so much for sharing some of these insights. Traditional ecological knowledge, very crucial. Some of these things are still so relevant and would certainly benefit from modern knowledge and technologies, because some of the issues of climate are severe. So in the past, you had a small community, population size was manageable. So when you said don't go and farm on Tuesday or on Wednesday, and occasionally one stubborn person goes into the farm, the effect won't be as huge. But now, a big population, so everyone is in there. Some people say, I don't believe in the same faith as you or traditions as you. They go in there. The farm doesn't have any fallow lands don't have fallow periods, or people are still going and fishing, the fish can't recoup, stock is just dropping increasingly. I think also you mentioned, some subsistence farming, because you're in the city, you can try some, vertical farming in there. I'll use this to mention that the Prof is also part of a gardening community, so maybe he'll say hi to them as well. We can do that within the urban spaces as well. So it's been a big conversation, climate change. We've tried to explain what it means, spoken about a few solutions, but effectively, our final note is that climate change is here in Ghana. It's in our backyards, it's in our business, it's in our livelihoods, emotions, well-being, and there are things we can do. I'll just pass the mic to Prof to give us his, closing reflections, and we'll call it on today's episode. Yeah.
Right. I think you probably closed it better, but I think it's important for our listeners to take this away, and I'm emphasizing on it because sometimes people tend to think that climate change is just an environmental thing. And I'm really interested that climate change is about people. It's about a place, because from what the conversation we just had, we understand that very well. And it's also about the future we are shaping. That's what climate change is about. And that is something that people should appreciate. Because in Ghana, I think we're already seeing what really this looks like with examples that I gave you. And I'm sure the audience or the listeners will also have their own experience. I mean, because people are losing land, farmers are also dealing with uncertainty with their crops. People in Accra, Kumasi, Tamale, these big cities, they are suffering from heat and flooding.
And even wildlife.
You see, all this while we didn't talk about, that's because those are things that it's difficult to measure, but we know we have evidence also of wildlife being impacted, moving because of a change in weather. I spoke about humidity and all the stuff and that. And so this is where the challenge really lies. And that's why it's important for everybody to understand these issues. Because eventually understanding that the issue of climate change is not just an environmental issue for environmental people, it's for business people, it's for religious people, it's for economists, okay? It's for artists, it's for archaeology people, historical issues that we are talking about. Because that's where then we begin to think about the solutions. Because if you want to rebuild or build anything, we need to know, the real causes. And everybody here is a contributor to climate change that we're talking about. Class one, population, our involvement. You spoke about everyday our involvement. Once we travel, we put the lights on, we travel to places. So, for me, for young people listening, I think this is where they can look at it as something they want to find a solution to. And so people should not think they are powerless, or they shouldn't be doing the typical, this is the government. Why is the government not doing something about it? Or why is the government not? I don't believe in that. I think that every decision matters. And so we shouldn't think of ourselves as not capable or powerless. Because how we treat our environment and how we hold our leaders accountable is important. But also let's innovate in our fields. We cannot innovate in our fields and together find solutions. I don't believe the solution lies necessarily with somebody sitting somewhere doing it. It's with us. There are several examples of people who have worked together as a group and solved problems in their communities. And I think that's what we all need to look at. So let's first of all understand what climate change is, see how we contribute to the change that we're experiencing. And then based on that, we then begin to see how we can also be the solutionist, the people who form the solutions. We are not waiting for America, China, or the UK to give us funds necessarily. How can we use the resources or the nature-based solutions that we have around us to address the challenge that we face? Because I still think nature can be important. It starts from there. I mean, I've planted trees and I've seen the trees grow, and I enjoyed, being around a tree in my house. That's all. It's a simple thing. So I think we should all look at how we can play a role in improving our resilience to climate change, so that even when it rains a lot, we don't fear that it will cause harm to us. We just think of it as rain, and that the rain can also even become another useful resource if we harvest it. So thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this, and I hope that our listeners will have enjoyed it and take some key nuggets from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Boafo. Guys, so that's it from us today. Please keep sharing the GWS NaturePod with your friends, families, and other people in the space here. Goodbye.